All right, RT. So I appreciate you coming on the show. I told you there's a storm coming in Jersey. You said you got some snow out in Colorado on a Friday afternoon. I guess, what is it, an hour earlier by you? 2:30?
2 hours. Yep.
2 hours. So
Yep.
it's 1:30. So it's like midday for you.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I don't remember if your assistant, was it Bella?
Hmm.
I don't know if she found me or I don't know. I can never keep track of everything, but we got connected
We
somehow.
we probably found you through. We use a service called Oscar Hamilton,
Oh yeah, sure.
and they source podcast interviews for people like me, and
Yeah,
they've been doing a
I get
great job.
approached by them all the time. So I'm excited. And my son is a huge watch enthusiast. When I told him you were coming on the show, he's like, "Oh, those are so cool." He's in college and he's like, "You
Awesome.
got to get one." I'm like, "You got 3 grand?" It's like it's a little out of his. He doesn't even have his first job yet, so it's something to work towards. But I told you the podcast is about telling your story and your journey to where you are, and then we'll talk about the business. And I know you have some other businesses actually also, right?
Hmm.
But maybe we want to go back, talk about where you grew up, your educational background, and I know you. I forget you told me you are an engineer. You have an engineering degree or something. So we'll get
That's
into all
correct.
that stuff. Okay, good. See, I read the bio a little while ago,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Thanks.
then take me through your story. Let's go back, and then I'll ask you questions as we go.
For sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, about an hour west of Philadelphia. And technically, I was in Goglersville, Pennsylvania, which is a little
Okay.
town outside of Reading. And I am a fourth generation Christmas tree farm owner.
Ah,
So my great grandfather started DeLong Christmas Tree Farm there in Pennsylvania in 1941.
okay.
And
Is your family
that's that
still in
kind
the
of
business?
so long story short on the business is,
Right.
Christmas trees are not today a profitable business unless
Right.
you're huge.
Yeah.
And so the business started to flutter. And when I was in college, and then my mom took over the family business basically when I went to college. And in 2020, unfortunately, we lost my mom to cancer.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And with that, we basically lost the momentum of the business. And I went ahead and as an only child, and now living in Colorado with my own family, 2 kids of
Right.
my own, I decided to sell the business, sell the farm, and it's still in operation.
Oh,
The family
okay.
that bought it took it over and still using the family name, and having fun with it. I've driven by and saw all the renovations they did on my grandparents' home, and it's looking great. Sounds like they're doing great, and
Yeah, so it's
I'm
coming
really
back.
really proud that they were
Yeah.
able to kind of resurrect it.
It's
But
funny. I don't know a
but
lot
yeah.
about that business, but I just closed on a client's property. He bought a farm up in northern Jersey, and it had a
Mhm.
Christmas tree farm. And he's like, I want to keep this going, but I'm not going to do it. So he's
Yeah.
got a guy, and we had to find like a farm attorney up there. We're working on all the
Yeah.
approvals and everything like that. So it's something I didn't really know anything about until
Yeah,
like 3 weeks
it's a
ago.
fascinating business, and I'm really blessed that I got to grow up. I mean, on a farm, and that being it was really our side hustle
Yeah.
as a family forever. Because I mean, my great grandfather started it, and my grandfather went to Duke and studied. He's a doctorate in forestry from Duke.
Wow.
And so, he was just an expert at all things trees, and especially Christmas trees. And he worked his whole career for the state of Pennsylvania as a forester.
Oh, okay.
And then we had the family farm that obviously, really the biggest issue with the Christmas tree farm is it only makes revenue for 20 days a
Right.
year.
Yeah, exactly.
And the rest of the year you're
Yeah,
spending
it's the
all or
definition of
most
a
or more
side.
money.
Yeah, and you got to right. You got to cultivate these things and get them to grow
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
harvest, basically.
But because of all that, my grandparents and my parents were able to teach me a lot of great lessons about entrepreneurship, about
Sure.
what it's like to run a business, about financial things. And from the age of about 5 or 6, I was out selling trees every holiday season.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned marketing and sales, is from my grandparents and my parents, just kind of bringing me up in there. And yeah, so when I was always interested in Legos and building things and how things worked. And so
Right.
even though both my parents were in marketing and advertising, they kind of pushed me in the direction of originally architecture. But I ended up going to school. I went to Penn State and studied engineering. So I graduated with an industrial engineering degree, which is more on like the supply chain and logistics side of engineering.
Okay.
And that's really, you know, I've grew up around marketing, advertising, small business ownership. And I love that stuff. You know, for instance, my family, when we watch the Super Bowl every year, they would like, I still call it sports ball. I'm not a sports person. My parents never were, but they would mute the sports ball, and then they would turn it back on when the ads came on, and they would tell me like, here's how much Pepsi and Coke spent on that ad, and here's why they did it. And like, they just like, they nerded out about that stuff. And
I'm
so
surprised,
so
you
do
went
I.
to Penn State, Big Ten. I think you'd be a big college football fan. We got Indiana. My son's graduating there. My daughter's at Maryland.
Awesome.
My wife went to Florida State.
Cool.
So we're big college football fans. So I'm surprised you don't have the RV and drive out there every game.
College football is the only sport I mildly follow because of Penn State. You know, I went to games in person. I sat in the student section. I mean, I feel like it's a bucket list thing for so many people is to go to
a whiteout or something. Yeah,
exactly. Go to a whiteout or something like that. I mean, it's amazing. So I love that. I definitely, you know, I want to get back there and go to a game. I want to take my kids to a game once they are old enough to appreciate it and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm a fan, but I would definitely call myself a bandwagon Penn State fan.
I mean, I have friends out in Pennsylvania. They literally go in their RV to every single game. I don't even know if they leave the RV and go in the stadium very often, but it's like a religion, you know, and it is in a lot of the Midwest states. You know, Indiana's the same way for basketball and football. Yeah. It's pretty fun.
Well, and that's why, you know, my mom went to Penn State, and so she basically, I went and visited Indiana. I visited some of the other Big Ten great schools, and I decided to go to Penn State for a number of reasons, but that experience, you know, that many people in one place, and that like cult following that Penn State sports and academics has is why I wanted to go there. And the other reason is, I thought I wanted to do something in engineering, but I didn't know like what type of engineering. I couldn't even wrap my head around what all the versions were. But Penn State is like top 10 and I don't know, 10 different engineering degrees. So that's why I ended up going there.
So when did you graduate then?
2014.
Okay, so did they have the hub at that point? The huge student center, they had it already?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yep. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time there.
Crazy what school's like now and was like 30 years ago. You know, we didn't have that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's my mom just loved to come up and visit because, you know, she would tell me reminiscing stories about all the different places that did exist or still existed, but
probably when your mom was there, the creamery was there, right? But not the hub. That's all new.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I studied and graduated with an industrial engineering degree, but throughout college, I kind of dabbled in a bunch of different things. When I was a freshman, I got recruited by College Works Painting, which is a multi-level marketing company doing exterior house painting with college kids in the summer. And when I was 19, I ran a 6-figure painting business in the summer. And it was such an amazing experience, taught me everything I know about like
that's
individual entrepreneurship.
Right. You have guys working for you too. You had to learn to manage them and the whole thing. You had a team.
Yeah.
Right?
So I had 3 different crews of painters to do the work. I had crews of people that went door to door, you know, trying to develop the business. And I was kind of like the job site supervisor on a lot of that stuff.
And that was their shtick. Like they find college kids to do it during the summer, and they expect when you're done with college, probably move on, right? And the next group comes in. Yeah,
and they take a cut, you know, for giving you all the insurance and the equipment and the knowledge and all that stuff. But yeah,
I'm forever grateful,
you know? To College Works. Yeah, and they, you know, they taught me so much just throwing you into the ring, you know, and you kind of have to figure it out.
Yeah. Now that's not the group out of Canada. Is there was a guy I met, he was on my podcast. His name was Chris Thompson. His company, I think, is called Student Works. They do exactly the same thing, though. They do summer painting like businesses.
4 different companies that do basically the same thing. There's College Works, there's Student Works, there's College Painters, and there's one other I'm forgetting.
And it's pretty competitive to get in the program, right? I mean, because you can make good money if you're really hustling during the summer.
Oh yeah, I mean revenue in my business, and it was just me running this little painting business. I did I think 129,000
Yeah, for the
over the
summer,
summer,
right?
and net profit to me, cash in the bank, maybe 20, 25 of
Okay,
that.
so that's 20%. That's
Which
a
at
very good profit margin.
Yeah, and at
Yeah.
19, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a
I
fortune.
was yeah, I was sitting pretty,
I
right?
mean,
Like that
look,
was
you and I
great.
both know there's some small
Um,
business owners don't do $120,000 in a year in revenue.
for sure, yeah,
So
yeah, and
yeah.
so that was my first like business that I totally did myself. I had a lot of fun with it, and decided to do it again, and kind of like move up the ladder, as it were, and recruit other people. And one of the guys I recruited, his name's Tyler Wolf, and
Hmm.
he ended up becoming my business partner in Vortic Watch Company,
Oh, okay,
which we
cool.
still run today.
Awesome.
So that's kind of the origin story. He was also running a painting business with College Works, and we just became friends through that program. We talked about golf, and so when we went back to Penn State the next semester, we started playing golf together.
Okay.
And we had the idea for Vortic Watch Company on the golf course one afternoon.
So did you, and
um,
we're going to talk more about Vortec, but did you go to work? Did you get a job coming out of school, or did the two of you say, we're starting this company?
yeah, so both. So we my junior year, I got a great internship with Sam's Club down in Bentonville, Arkansas.
Uh-huh. Sure.
And I
Talk about
worked. It was
logistics.
actually,
That's a good place to learn about
yeah,
logistics, right?
for sure. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to go to Penn State. I think one of my advisors at school one time, he said, your resume is all about the logos and the brands that you put on it, and so far, I had Penn State. I did an internship with Procter and Gamble in manufacturing, so
Yeah.
big
All
big
good
resume
stuff,
builder
right?
there. And then I walked into Sam's Club, the little brother of Walmart,
Right.
and got an internship there. I spent 6 months in Arkansas, and then they hired me full time in Walmart logistics, which is like the top of the top. I mean, a lot of people don't think about Walmart being like the
Right.
ideal dream job, but for me it was,
Oh
because
my God, they're moving
I was
packages all over the world all the
they
time,
are the
24 hours a
world's
day, right?
largest logistics operation.
I'm not surprised.
And I
Yeah.
mean, billions of boxes being
Yeah.
moved around all the time. And I was 22, and I had a $20 million capital budget,
Wow.
basically installing robots and conveyor systems in warehouses, in mostly in the Southeast, warehouses that were about as old as I was. They were built in the late 80s, early 90s, and they needed renovated to brought up to basically compete with Amazon. That was my, this is 2014 to
Right. It's before
2016.
the
I worked two
pandemic.
years
Amazon
then.
boomed after, but so did
Yep,
Walmart during the pandemic. Yeah. So they
for
didn't
sure.
have
And
everything didn't go through Bentonville. They had different locations,
mhm.
right, to move their products
Oh
around.
yeah. Oh, so there's I think 170 distribution centers that Walmart has around the
So
country,
the trucks take
to
stuff from
support.
there and then sure.
Yep, and they have at that time when I worked there, they had almost 10,000 trucks in the fleet, and they had about 10,000 stores. And so you put the distribution centers in common locations that make sense
Sure.
logistically.
Right.
And so they stationed me in Loveland, Colorado, which is just south
Okay.
of where I live now in Fort Collins.
Got it.
And so that's how I got here to Colorado. Is Walmart said, hey, do you want to, you can either stay here in Bentonville and work for the home office and travel
Yeah.
around, or you can go to Colorado. They need help there in that distribution center. And then you'll travel a lot, and that's why they put me in Colorado. Is Denver, if you didn't know, is the third largest airport in the world.
Yeah, I'm not
So
surprised. I know Denver's a
it's
big
it's
airport. Yeah.
yeah, so it's just very inexpensive to fly around the country from Denver, and so that's why they put me there.
Got it. Okay. Makes
And
sense.
so I was traveling around doing all kinds of basically internal consulting for Walmart logistics.
So do they have
And
their own fleet of planes? Like, they're moving tons of packages every day, right?
aircraft, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would assume that they have at least some, but they have trucks, and that's really the backbone of Walmart, is the trucking.
Got it. Got it.
And so yeah, so that was my job out of college. And then Tyler was doing basically a business where he was fixing iPhones. So it was called iCracked.
Uh-huh.
And he was like almost going like door to door, or business to business, fixing people's cracked screens on phones. And that was good money, but he wasn't like stoked about it. It wasn't like a long-term thing for him. So he came out to visit me after I moved to Colorado, and he was just like, man, this place is awesome. I'd love to move here. And I don't know exactly how it came up, but we decided like, hey, I have an extra room in my house. Why don't you come out here, Tyler, and we'll start that watch company that we were talking about in college. And so that was 2014. We put what we call the American Artisan Series, a product of Vortic Watch Company, on Kickstarter in November of 2014. And the rest is history. We've sold every watch we've ever made since.
So did you guys write a business plan at that point? Had you written one in college? What did you have at that point?
Yeah, so we won 2 business plan competitions in
Oh,
college,
nice. Okay.
for Vortic. But we started with a different idea. Our original idea on the golf course was a watch that fit a little better. We called it twist to fit, like you twisted a knob on the watch and it tightened around your wrist in like really small increments.
Got it.
So that it would be like a sports watch.
Right. Yeah, because the other way is it never fits perfectly. You take some links out, it still moves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so we invented that. We actually still own a patent on that idea.
Okay.
And we were pitching that for business plan competitions, and we raised some money, but like basically the advice we got around that is hey guys, that's really cool, but that's going to cost a fortune to develop. So like maybe start with something else that's more minimum viable product, and then ease into it. And so that's why we came up with a bunch of other ideas, but the one that stuck is we salvage and restore antique American pocket watches from about 100 years ago, just the insides of those pocket watches, and we turn them into one-of-a-kind wristwatches. And the reason we got there is because we wanted to, if we were going to make a different product than the original one we thought of, we wanted to make something that was really cool, that we could build a brand out of, that people would really get a following behind.
Right.
And then was 100% or as close to 100% made in USA as possible, because made in America in 2014 was kind of at an all-time high as far as like search results and popularity.
Sure.
And so we wanted to, try to cash in on that, ride the wave of American made, and also from an integrity of manufacturing standpoint, it was like, man, that's probably the right thing to do with these old pocket watches. And yeah, we put that idea on Kickstarter, and people really rallied behind it. They thought it was a great idea, upcycling, saving these old things, making one-of-a-kind stuff.
Well, did you have the watches at that point? I mean, I don't know anything about Kickstarter. Can you just do a Kickstarter campaign, not have a product yet? Just an idea?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
Absolutely can. Okay. Yep. So I call it minimum viable product today, but to be honest with you, we took an old pocket watch, we 3D printed a case for it, and we super glued it together and took pictures of it and put it on the internet and said,
it's called a prototype. That's good.
Yeah. We were just like, hey, this is our idea. We don't really know how we're going to make it, but that's kind of the point of Kickstarter. If we raise at least $10,000, we'll put all that $10,000 into the development of the first product, and then we'll go from there. And we raised $40,000 in 30 days.
Nice.
And then Tyler started making them and figuring out how to set it all up from a manufacturing standpoint.
Now you had orders and you had to fill them.
Yeah, we had to fill those orders. It took us about a year to make the watches we sold on Kickstarter. And then I still had my corporate job with Walmart at that point. So my role was basically just nights and weekends, raising money, figuring out financing, just like being the foundation financially of the business.
Got it.
Plus we were doing all the work. Tyler was living and working in the house that I bought when I got out here. And so I was just kind of his stability, I guess, for those first couple of years. And then, in 2017, I think it was like summer of 2017, I left the corporate job and went full-time Vortic, and been so ever since. We've hired about, on average, like 1 employee a year since then, and still have a small team, but a decent sized business now, and just trying to make as many watches as we can.
So you're manufacturing the watch, you're putting them together in-house, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we started by having contract manufacturers make all the parts, and then we would just assemble it, make the box, and then ship it to the customer. And over the span of like 2016 to 2019, we brought almost all of it in-house. So now
timing.
we have our own,
Yeah.
and so we have all
Yeah.
our own manufacturing, which it ended up being just absolutely perfect timing. By the beginning of 2019, we were making 90% of the cost of goods in Fort Collins, Colorado. And so when the pandemic hit, we didn't stop. We didn't need to figure out how to get something out of China. Like absolutely
Right.
nothing
Nothing
from
stuck on a
our
boat
product comes.
for a month
Yeah,
and a
yeah,
half, right?
it can't. It just,
Yeah.
that's not where our stuff comes from. And so I think that's why our 2020 was our best sales year ever. We produced the highest quality watches you could buy, and we went all in on kind of a new focus, which was, we I would say until 2019, we were basically made to order, custom orders that we would kind of make when we got them. And then in late 2019, we tested an idea of, we called it the watch of the day. So
Right. I've seen that on your website.
one watch every day at 12 noon. And we just went all in on that concept in 2020 because people didn't want to pay us a few $1,000s and then wait 8 to 12 weeks for their watch
Right.
in the middle of a pandemic. Like just the unknown of everything was stressful.
Yeah. Isn't
And
this is
so
your website, right? So you come out with a different watch
yeah.
every day, not like once a month?
Nope. Every weekday, currently Monday through Friday at 12 noon Mountain Time, we release one new one of a kind watch.
Yeah. So here's the watch of the day. The Lancaster's today's watch, right?
Yep. And it's the Lancaster 123. So that's the 123rd watch we've made using a Hamilton pocket watch movement. That's how that works.
Got it. Okay. So let me ask you a question. So it says sold, right? So those are sold out, right? It's basically
Correct.
so obviously you're using vintage, and I want to get into the business and the way you run the business, the whole thing, but I'm curious about the product. You're selling vintage repurposed pocket watches, right? How many can you make? I mean, how many of these pocket watches do you get your hands on? Is it, you end up finding them and there's a case of them, or
Yeah, awesome question. So we buy out estate sales. Anytime a pawn shop or a jewelry store goes out of business, they typically have a whole bunch of pocket watches in the back that somebody forgot about. Pawn shops scrap pocket watches for the gold and silver of their case, leaving the movement, dial, and hands, the guts of the pocket watch, basically trash to those people. And that's, we're upcycling trash to treasure. We're trying to use that antique American piece of history, right? It's an old pocket watch. Usually they were made between the year 1900 and 1940 on average. That's the era
the
they're from.
watch time, right? When people
Yeah,
I used to have a pocket watch. Yeah.
Well, in 1920, there was no way to tell time besides a clock and a pocket watch, and obviously no phones at that time. And so the only thing you had in your pocket was your wallet and your pocket watch. And so that's the era that they're from, and that's really our mission, is to just save as many of those as we can. But a lot of people don't know that between 1850 and 1950 ish, in that 100 years, over 100 million pocket watches were manufactured in the United States. Back then, talk in the early 1900s, America was basically the Switzerland of the world. We made all the best mechanical watches, and they were all pocket watches. And so there's a lot of them out there. You just have to know where to
find
look.
them.
And then you have to, the hardest thing for us is not actually finding the pocket watches, it's restoring them, fixing them, making them work and tell time again.
Got it.
And that's because that's a skilled trade. And if you follow the skilled trade gap right now, there are not enough, just like there's not enough plumbers and, mechanics in the world, there's very much so not enough watchmakers. There's not enough people, especially in America, that know how to fix an old pocket watch or wristwatch for that matter. And so we employ, I would venture to bet we work with a third of the entire population of United States based watchmakers that are able to do what we do. And so we kind of have ownership over this niche in several ways. And that's what we do.
If you go into a pawn shop, let's say, or an estate sale, how many pocket watches do you find that are the same? I understand you might find a lot of pocket watches, but you're trying to make like a line of watches, kind of, right? You're not just going to
Yeah.
throw things. Hey, there's one of these. If I'm going to buy a Lancaster today, how many watches are available in the Lancaster 123?
Just one. It's
Oh, it's
completely one of a
just
kind,
one.
totally unique piece. And
Oh, so every day you
that's
have one
why,
watch for sale.
and it's one of a kind. And when it's sold, it's gone. That's it. Yep.
Got it. So
And
you're not
that's
making
why the
like
business
10 of
model
them or
works.
whatever.
No, that's it. Yeah. So we
Oh,
make our business model super simple with watch of the day, 5 days a week. That's roughly 260 watches a year.
right.
Um,
And that you can keep up
then,
with. Okay, that makes
yeah,
sense.
and that's solid. We're trying to get to 7 watches a week if we can. So that'd be 365. That'd be awesome. But that's top. That's the best we can do. 365 watches a year in that program is the best we can do. We also, if you have, your grandfather's or your grandmother's pocket watch, we have a service called Convert Your Watch, where
Yep.
we
So that on the website.
receive
Yep.
pocket watches. We can turn them into wristwatches for a service. That's probably about 20% of our business. We'll do
Okay.
50 to 75 of those a year. And then we also have fun limited editions like the military edition. And so to answer your other question, almost none of the pocket watches are the same. They were
Okay.
made by the same company in the same year, but the dial of the pocket watch is different.
Okay.
They all, and if you scroll through that page you were just on, you'll see every single one is just a little different, and we put different case on and make them look totally different.
Right.
But they're one of a kind.
Okay.
Except when we get to the US military watches from World War II.
Okay.
So if you go to our /military page, or the military edition is what we call it,
We can do that
Hamilton
right now.
Watch Company made 120 some thousand 120,000 pocket watches with a 24-hour black dial. So the face of it is black, the numerals are white, the hands are white.
Right
and
here,
they
right?
made, yep. And so they took that pocket watch and they made over 100,000 of them. And they were for the US Army Air Corps, what we now call the Air Force at
Yep.
this time. And those were called the Master Navigator's Watch. So every navigator on the bomber aircrafts in World War II was carrying one of those pocket watches. And that's how they knew what time it was, but that's also how they knew where they were, because without GPS, you need to know what time it is and what time you took off and where you're going, and how fast you're going in order to figure out where you are.
Okay.
And so that was a tool that they used in the military back then. And long story short, when we buy those, I can buy dozens of them that look the same. And so every year on Veterans Day, we release 50 of those that are exactly the same. And it's a limited edition.
Nice.
And for 3 years in a row, we've sold out within 24 to 48 hours. That's definitely our most popular product. And we also donate $500 from the sale of that watch to the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative, which is one of the only watchmaking schools in the world, but they focus on training US military vets how to be watchmakers.
Oh,
so
cool.
It's obviously very tied into what we do.
That's nice. All right. So let's talk then about the business itself, right? So, So I'm glad to hear that, because I'm always telling people about writing a business plan. It obviously helped you guys because it got you started and you worked through the idea, and then you were able to enter competitions or raise money. How often would you say you go back to that? I mean, has it become kind of like a strategic planning document in terms? I mean, might have gone into multiple things, but I'm sure you do strategic planning all the time, right?
Yeah. So when we first started, we called it a business plan. And I used that business plan. I had a 20 or 30 page business plan and a 7 or 8 slide pitch deck. And I used those to raise money. And I've raised 7 figures for this company in the early days. And so that's really what I needed to talk to bankers and investors.
Right.
Today, now that we have revenue and profitability, I just have a strategic plan, which is a very refined version of that business plan. It's like maybe 7 or 8 pages long. I don't really need the pitch deck anymore because I'm not raising money, and bankers want to see, like, right now we're bankable. And so I talk to financiers, not investors, and they want to see more like a business plan with the financials. And so now I have that strategic plan. And then I have this massive spreadsheet where I just nerd out on like, okay, here's our cost of goods, here's
Right,
like
sure.
our projections, all that kind of stuff. And that's all that everybody needs now. But to answer your question, we basically look at that for the last few years. We've looked at it every 18 months or so. But my business partner Tyler and I just did a strategic planning like trip last week actually, and we decided we were going to revise that strategic plan once a year. And so like first or second week of January, we were just going to look at it, refine it, send it to all of our investors, advisors, bankers, and say, all right, here's the new plan for the next 2 to 3 years based on last year.
So you still have investors in the company?
Yes. Yeah,
so
we have
a cap table you got to manage, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. All the fun stuff involved in all that. I send a monthly, I send a weekly email to all of my customers, and then I send a monthly update email to all of my investors, and just keep everyone in the loop. Here's cash on hand. Here's sales last month, last couple months. Here's what's coming up. Here's when you get your K1. All the stuff they want to know.
No, you want to be transparent, right? Especially if you ever need their help in the future. But if they do well in the business, they'll follow you till your next thing. So what were one or two challenges you had in terms of, getting started? And then I'm curious as to what kind of challenges that you feel that you faced that you would maybe do differently, or you've learned along the way. Besides raising money, that was obviously part of it, but yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the big challenges getting started was raising money, especially raising money for a physical product in today's digital world. Most investors are just like, hey, this is cool, but like, does anyone even wear watches anymore?
Right.
What about the Apple Watch? I heard like, come back to me when you have a software and app kid a lot,
right.
And that was just kind of unfortunate. And so what I learned from that is just like, it's all about product market fit in terms of obviously customers, but also investors. You just have to find people that get it.
Yeah.
And so thankfully we found people that at least like watches, or just
you got to find the people.
So that was a big challenge. The biggest challenges that we've faced have been figuring out how to manufacture the product, especially manufacturing in the United States. And that's really,
was that a cost issue, or in the United States? I mean, was that the obstacle? It was really had a
cost of goods is 3 to 5 times higher in general on stuff like what we do, if you're comparing it to China. And so for that reason, you have to charge more. And so we're lucky in that our business model is highly niche, and no one else we don't have any competitors in this niche. And we're like our marketing plan of selling one a day is just really popular. People like that idea. And so the price is, what do they call it? I think it's called like price flexibility or something like that, where whether we charge 2,500 or 5,500, we're still going to sell it. It doesn't really matter,
because there's going to be somebody who's going to buy the watch.
Yeah. But for us, our cost is now standardized. Like we've figured it out. And it's a lot higher than it would be if we made all the parts in China, but it's sustainable based on the prices that we have to charge now. And so that journey of figuring out how much it costs, where it gets made, standardizing it, figuring out how much to charge, and then justifying that price. I mean, that took 3 to 5 years of testing and trying and tweaking.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
All that stuff. I mean, just for an example, our watches on Kickstarter in 2014, if you had bought one then, you could buy one for $600 to $900.
Okay.
And
that was because it was a Kickstarter price, or because
we had no idea what it would cost to
right.
It.
You had no idea.
Like,
that happens a lot. You go to somebody, why are you charging that? They go, I don't know. We thought that was a good price.
We were like, I don't know. Like,
and you're losing like $400 a watch. You don't even know.
Oh, we lost a ton of, we raised 40,000 on Kickstarter, but I bet we lost from a net profit standpoint, 150,000 on making those watches.
Like way off.
Yeah. So we had no idea. Absolutely no idea.
Right.
And that's not factoring in time,
it took us a year to figure it out. Cost of goods sold. I understand.
Yeah. So but that's how you learn, right? And that's
hopefully it doesn't put you out of business. That's what you hope,
For sure. And that's what I was going to say is what Tyler and I talk about all the time, and what he really harps on in manufacturing, because right now, the way we have it set up is he runs all manufacturing and I run all marketing and finance. And that's our division of the business. And so like, he's a firm believer in that fail fast and fail cheap mindset of like, let's try it, test it, prototype it. And you know what, if it doesn't work, scrap it and move on before we dump a bunch of other time in it.
Right.
Because we didn't do that when we started.
Right.
Our first failures were really expensive and really time consuming.
Yeah.
Because we just had no idea. But we've learned enough now that we can just kind of, learn more
avoid
quickly
the big stuff, right?
And avoid those issues that could put you under.
Yeah. I've had a lot of entrepreneurs tell me that, they can live with the small mistakes, because you always make mistakes. You're testing stuff, you're trying things out. You think this is going to work and it doesn't, whatever. They can live, but it's the big mistakes that they want to avoid. That's why you're testing and planning and, asking your clientele and checking with the watch community. Cause you and I both know, a lot of people probably don't. There's a whole underground community of people that are into watches and things like that. That's a huge market. And that's, you can live through those little things. It's the big ones that'll kill you.
And that's really, so our next venture. So like one of the issues with Vortic Watch Company right now is that we can only make about one watch a day. So, max business, with all the stuff that we do is like 400 to 450 watches a year. And even if we charge 5,000 a watch, that's
you're
still,
kind of capped,
a
revenue,
small business.
Right?
Yeah. And so we're actually, later this year, we're going to come out with a sister company is what we call it, but a whole separate company, a watch company under the Vortic Watch Company umbrella.
A different division. Right.
Yeah. And we're going to make modern watches that are a lot more scalable. We're going to still do everything we do right now. That's not going to change at all. It's a system. It's working perfectly. It's a brand that we love. But we're just going to add another thing. And this other thing will be more like Shinola, if you're familiar with them, but mass market appeal, $800 to $1,200 US price point, which is a much more aggressive price point. We can sell thousands, if not 10,000s of units.
Right. Shinola makes watches and bicycles, right?
And all kinds of other stuff. And they have a hotel and, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, people don't know that where
cool
the expression
brand.
comes. You don't know shit from Shinola. They don't know the expression, but that's where it comes from, right?
That's where it comes from.
They used to make brown shoe polish or something like that.
Yeah. That's and so that's our new brand is going to directly compete with them as far as market share, price point. They're one of the only American watch companies besides us. And so we'll compete with them. And the way we're getting there and the way we're going to market everything is really all the stuff that we're talking about right now. We're doing a YouTube show called Custer and Wolf Building a Watch Company.
Cool.
Tyler and I on camera every week discussing the ins and out of the business and what we're doing, behind the scenes video,
like your own reality show.
All kinds of stuff. Basically. Yeah.
I like that. That's a great marketing idea. Is that your idea?
Yeah. Tyler and I, came up with that idea, trying to like, how do we, our investors challenged us to say like, okay, cool. You want to start this sister company or whatever, and you want to take on Shinola. Like, that's a big goal. That's really cool. But like, why do people care? Like, are you going to make the watch special in any way? And we're like, we don't want to make a crazy watch that like is super niche anymore. We want to make a mass market appealing watch.
Right.
And so how do we make it special without making it crazy looking or whatever? And one of the best ways to make it special is to access that following of people and
they know you and they know what's going on. That's part of your life.
Like people.
Yeah, no, that's a lot to be said for that, right?
Well, and one of the biggest things I've learned about business is like people, like in investing, every single one of our investors, they told me we didn't like Vortic Watch Company is cool, but like we invested in RT and Tyler.
Oh, no
like
question.
They invested in us as humans.
Oh yeah,
right?
Because you have nothing to invest in. It's just you guys. If you can't execute,
especially at first,
you're done. Yeah, at first, of course.
And so from an investment standpoint, that's a pretty good example. But then also from a customer standpoint, we have so many customers when they leave us reviews, they say, I'm really glad that, like, thanks to RT for talking to me at this trade show or whatever that I met him, or, I'm really thankful for Kyle, who's our operations manager, who talks to most of our customers now. like Kyle was so helpful, like helping me pick which case I want and all that stuff. Like they call us out by name. They're not just buying this watch. It's like they're working with a small business and a human and a face that's behind it. And so we want to just triple down on that idea because we know it'll work from our experience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it's hard to differentiate. I mean, you make another sneaker, you make another watch, you make another pair of glasses.
Yeah.
Then it's all marketing. You're just trying to create a brand behind something, and it doesn't just, I think the human side of it and being able to connect with people and see your world and what you go through, and people resonate, with that. They really can.
Well, and for me, like I said, my parents were both in advertising and PR their whole careers. There's a huge difference between marketing and advertising. And a lot of people don't get that deep, right?
Right.
So what we do at Vortic is marketing. We don't spend money much. I mean, we a little bit here and there, but we don't spend advertising dollars on magazine ads or digital marketing like Facebook ads, Instagram ads, that kind of stuff. We do like traditional marketing, connecting with customers. This YouTube show is a great example. We're building a brand that's going to be around for hopefully decades, if not centuries. And so if you want to do that, you do marketing. And from marketing, people invest in your brand. From advertising, people buy your products.
Makes sense.
And there's a very distinct difference there that we're trying to just, again, triple down on.
Right. For sure. So how many employees you got now?
5 total.
Including you guys, or that are working for the two of you?
There's 7 of us total. Yeah.
Okay. And what would you say now are some of the more on a daily basis challenges that you've had to face, that like if somebody was getting started in business, you would say, hey, don't do this or do it this way, or advice for people that are listening and just getting started and they think they don't need a business plan because they don't listen to me, so they're listening to you. What would be some advice you would give them?
Number one piece of advice that I like to share is don't be afraid to ask for help. Asking for help from investors, advisors, business partners, your customers, especially. One of the worst things we ever had to deal with was early on we got sued by the Swatch Group, which is the world's largest watch conglomerate.
All kinds of people.
Yeah. And so for years of that lawsuit, I didn't ask for help. I just kind of took it on. I figured it out. Like I found the attorneys and we just fought, and it was eating at me and it was killing me. It was just it was really hurting us.
Right.
Yeah. And when I finally sent an email to, we have tens of thousands of people on our email list. When I sent an email about it to our list, the outpouring of help was insane. It's one of the reasons we did so well in 2020 is because I at one point I was just like, let's just be hyper transparent about everything. Yeah. And when that switch flipped, it was huge because, again, it's that investing in your brand and your product versus buying your thing. They felt like they were part of our story and our journey because they were buying a watch, but they were also helping a small American company take on the Goliath that is Swatch, right?
Yeah.
And so that was really cool. Story. So definitely just ask for help, right? And
I like advisory
if
boards,
you think you might need it.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. All that kind of stuff. Coaches, business coaches, business partners. Like, don't be afraid of bringing in someone that's an expert in something that you're not.
And learn.
Even
avoid
employees.
The big mistakes, right? That's how you avoid the big mistakes.
For sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of people take they don't take advantage of the fact that I don't make the watches. I don't touch a single part that we make. My job is marketing. And so when we have a problem, it's so valuable to walk in and ask, like Tyler walks up to one of our machinists who's making the parts. She's just like, hey, there's this thing I'm working on for this other project. Like, what do you think?
Right.
Or we're talking about our social media strategy for next year. And it's just like, hey, like, I don't do it. I'm not the one actually posting the pictures on Instagram. Right. So, hey, person that does that for us, what do you think? What would you do? Have you found any other softwares that can help all this stuff? And people aren't going to just volunteer to help you,
Right.
even
right.
if they're an investor, like whatever.
No,
So
no,
you
people
have to
love
go
to
search
help,
for that.
but they don't do it on their own. You gotta
Yeah.
say, hey, I need your help. Now, I'm very curious as a lawyer and as people listening, what in the world? So you're making one of a kind watches from repurposing pocket watches and so forth. What in the world is Swatch suing you? They have a plastic watch that has nothing to do with what you guys sell. The only difference is, I mean, the only similarity is if they both tell time. So besides that, I don't see it. What in the world were they suing you about?
Yeah, well, so the Swatch Group, and a lot of people just don't know this, but Swatch Group is 26 different brands, I think, at
Ah,
this point. They
okay.
have Swatch that
But
you're,
they own a lot of,
obviously
because like
familiar with.
Budweiser owns all these beers and you don't even know that they're owning
Exactly.
them.
Same,
Right.
same difference, right? So
Got it.
so Swatch owns Omega. That's the largest brand that they own, that
Okay.
everyone's
I
familiar
didn't
with.
know that. Okay.
But they also own a brand called Hamilton.
Okay.
And as you just saw on our
Oh
website,
yeah, right.
we
And you're
make,
repurposing the Hamilton.
yeah.
Right.
So the Hamilton Watch Company started in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1889, I believe.
Okay.
And they made some of the world's best pocket watches in Pennsylvania for 100 years. And then they went under, and the Swatch Group, or what holding company that went on to become the Swatch Group, bought the rights to that brand in the early 70s.
Out of
And
bankruptcy
so,
or whatever. Right.
yeah, and so they own the trademark on the word Hamilton as it pertains to watches.
Got
We
it.
make watches that say Hamilton right on the face. You understand after discussing it that that's the original face of that pocket watch. It's 100 years old. And so we're not touching it. We're not using their brand to make money. We're just taking a pocket watch, turning it a wristwatch, and calling it a Vortic. They did not understand that at first. And so they sued us over trademark infringement and counterfeiting. And it took almost 7 years.
Wow.
And we took them through every level. They could have appealed to the Supreme Court a few months ago, and they decided to drop the case instead of going that
Just
far.
recently. Took that long.
Yeah, very, very recently. Yeah. I mean, they sued us before we shipped our first watch, and we won the lawsuit outright, and it's totally over just a few months ago.
Now,
So
how did they know you're not even shipping? Well, I guess you're advertising and you're marketing, right?
we put we
Yeah,
put an
that's why.
advertisement in Watch Time magazine,
There you go.
the largest US watch magazine. And
Right.
we put our name on it. We said, we're taking pocket watches and turning into wristwatches. And we showed an example. And the example that we happened to use was a Hamilton pocket watch turned into a wristwatch. And so they sued us. And now I know more about trademark law than any
you want to
entrepreneur
learn,
should.
right? No, it's good. It's good to know. Look, I'm sure they have a big law firm on retainer, and the associate's job was assigned to that account. Says just keep looking and searching and finding things.
Oh yeah, I don't hold anything against them in terms of that kind of stuff. It's the way I look at at lawsuits, right? Like that is, I mean, it's a difficult conversation between a couple of people that work for two different companies, and it could have been resolved at any point if we came to terms, and we couldn't. So attorneys got involved, and judges got involved, and here we are.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, when I started the Accidental Entrepreneur about 3 years ago, I guess about maybe 6-8 months ago, I filed a trademark on the name The Accidental Entrepreneur, and I had already given up the rights to the word entrepreneur, right, in and of itself. You disclaim that. I get contacted by Entrepreneur, which owns entrepreneur.com, Entrepreneur Magazine, and which they do all the time. Anytime you use the word. So I ended up withdrawing. I didn't want to be bothered with it, but I do have colleagues of mine that would go after them, and I deal with it. But I just withdrew the application and said, listen, we'll move on with our lives and learn to coexist. But they didn't like that I was using, it wasn't like I was infringing on them. This has nothing to do with them. But they didn't like the word, so I guess it takes a while for people to come around, but it's good lesson.
Well, and another lesson there.
You trademark Vortic, right?
Yeah, we have that. But the lesson that I learned from all that about the law, especially trademark and IP law, is a trademark and a patent is only as good as the money that you have to protect it and support it.
Sure, 100%.
And those huge companies have tons of money to protect and support their trademarks, and that's the only defense they have against people like me and you trying to come in and use one of the words that's in their name.
It wasn't worth my time, aggravation, or my. But it's true. People ask me, "Oh, well, we trademarked this thing, or we whatever," and somebody's knocking it off in China. What are we going to do? I go, "What are we going to do? We're going to do nothing because this guy's selling it out of the back door of a factory." You know,
Right.
and
Yeah,
look, it adds some legitimacy to what you're doing, right? If whatever it is being knocked off, then obviously they think it has some viability, but you just
for sure.
can't, like you said, you can't do,
Well, and
can't
that's
enforce
what
everything.
that was the first thing my dad said when I called him about the lawsuit. Is he was just like, well, you've made it, you've officially made it, you got
Right.
sued by the largest company in your
Yeah.
industry, so
You're on their radar. If they
congratulations.
thought you weren't worth anything, they wouldn't have bothered.
Yeah, yeah. So huge life lessons out all that stuff. Obviously, huge stress, huge financial stress that all that went through, and a whole. You mentioned entrepreneur. There was actually a entrepreneur magazine story about me
It was
and
there.
Vortic and the whole battle and all that.
Nice.
It was pretty cool. I'm very thankful to them for telling that story, because not very many people would or
Right.
seem to understand the background and all that stuff. So
Well, they go after
um
every little verstunkene guy using the word entrepreneur in any respect, and he'll
yeah,
sue them and whatever. That's why my colleagues are like, I'll go after them. They're terrible,
yeah,
but they're trying to protect their mark. I mean, they're entitled
yeah.
to.
And it's and to the same point, it's not them, like it's not like the CEO or the publisher or head editor at Entrepreneur Magazine sees your brand and is
Yeah,
like,
it never makes it that
screw
up
those
there.
guys, let's go
Right.
get them. It's like, to your point, they have a retainer with a law firm that's their job is to protect their trademark at all
Yeah.
costs.
Yeah.
And so the people that I worked with at Entrepreneur were absolutely phenomenal humans that told my story and really cared about me as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
They're
And
reporters,
those are not
journalists.
the journalists are
No.
not the attorneys. So it's
Yeah. If
just,
you think
that's
about
why I
it, the
say
attorney wants to
it's a
go after
difficult
everybody. He
conversation.
generates fees that way. So
Yeah, that's
everything he can make into a case, he's like, let's go after them, and if the
yeah,
entrepreneur
yeah,
magazine's big enough, they don't care.
yeah. And
Ain't
so
no legal bill.
it's like you said, it's business. And
Yeah.
so and you got to, a lot of times you got to separate personal from business, not take some of that stuff personally, and that's really hard. And that would kind of be my last and other piece of advice, is just like, if you want to get into business for yourself and be an entrepreneur, you have to be strong. Like, you
Thick
have to
skin.
just
Yeah.
be ready for anything,
Right.
especially in today's world. Like, who knew a pandemic was going to hit? Who knew
Yeah.
inflation was going to hurt us so bad? Who knew
Yeah.
the supply chain was going to be absolutely
Screwed
ripped
up.
out from
I
under
know.
us
It's
overnight?
unbelievable.
So
I
you
don't think
gotta
people really
you guys be
appreciate the
ready.
globalness of everything that we do. The littlest part. You
Yeah,
said not all your parts come from the United States. It's like 90% or some odd, right? So
yeah.
there always could be something. My cousin
Well,
couldn't
and
get
it's
his couch because they couldn't get the glue. The
yeah, that's what I
glue.
was gonna say. I mean, we're
Go to Home
struggling right
Depot. Yeah.
now with our leather straps, the wristbands
To
for
get
the
the
watch,
leather
and
itself.
it's not so much the leather. It's in some ways, like, some types of leather are kind of behind. It's the labor, like,
Oh,
there's
sure.
there's this massive, especially entry level labor shortage that's
Yeah.
happening right now. And you need someone to punch a piece of leather out of a bigger piece of leather and then sew it and stitch it together. And that's, I don't know, a $15 an hour job. And
Right.
it sounds like people don't want to make only that now. So here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I appreciate all that stuff. You told us a little bit about what's ahead, right? You're working on this new company, so we may see some new products from you guys in the future. And it's vortecwatches.com. Is that the website?
Yeah, we say Vortic, like vortex and
Right.
TikTok.
It's
So it's
TIC, right?
VORTIC watches.com.
Okay. We'll put a link in the show notes. And I
Thank you.
appreciate spending some time with me. And I wish you the best of luck. Let's definitely stay in touch. I want to see how the business grows. But if anybody's looking for a unique watch, get on their mailing list, go to their website. You got one day to pick it out, and that's it. And then you got to wait
That's
for
it.
another one to come. Now, when you make, this is my one last question. When you make your
Yeah.
inventory, right? How far
Mhm.
out are you from the manufacturing standpoint? Like the one that was released today, it wasn't finished yesterday, right? Or is it
The one
close
that was
to it?
released today was manufactured, like, finished and started quality control about 25 days ago.
So you're always
Um,
you're
we
slated out about a month, 25
Right now
days.
we're trying to stay a month out. Our next goal is, once we get to a month out, we'll go to 7 watches a week. And then once we get there, we'll get to at least a month out. at 7 watches a week. And it's, you know, you kind of have to stage gate that supply chain process. And so those are our goals. And yeah, bottom line, we really want to stay at least a month out. Again, just in case, we don't know what's going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen in 30
Of
days?
course. Right. Things could shut down. Then you got to make up for it. I would think if the inventory is not a problem, you can go to a 10 a.m. and a 2 p.m. release, and you can do 2 a day. That would double your revenue.
We could, and it would, but you know, there is diminishing returns at some point from a branding standpoint.
Sure.
We love the fact, I think seven a week is great. It's one every day. That's hundreds of watches a year, which is a decent amount of revenue. And every single customer that buys one knows that they got one of only about 365 watches. And man, is that cool. People love that.
Definitely in the watch community, they love that kind of stuff. So RT, I can't thank you enough for spending time with me. Say hi to Tyler. I wish we should have had him on with you. Could have done
next time we'll do it again.
Interview.
You can interview him next week. I mean, he can tell you all about manufacturing and like all the hard, I mean, it's a whole separate conversation for sure.
All right.
And he can really speak to the accidental side, because he was not set out originally to be a machinist and running the manufacturing side of a business. And he would be the first to tell you that. So yeah, happy to continue this conversation whenever you'd like. I really appreciate you having me on the show. Yeah,
Thanks for joining me. All right. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.